"It's me," my son Tyler said, standing up from the head of the conference table. "I'm the new owner." The room fell completely silent. I'll never forget the look on Richard's face, my former boss who had fired me 11 months earlier, as the color drained from his cheeks. Sarah from HR stopped mid-sip, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her mouth. Mark from accounting, who had openly mocked me as I packed my desk, suddenly found the ceiling tiles fascinating. Tyler, only 26 years old, wearing a suit that fit him, better than any I'd ever owned, placed both hands on the polished mahogany table and leaned forward. "As of 9 a.m. this morning, Horizon Solutions belongs to Nexus Ventures, my company." He was looking directly at Richard. The quarterly reports were still open on everyone's tablets. The presentation about declining profits had just concluded, and my son's words cut through the corporate tension like a knife through butter. And the craziest part? I didn't even try to hide my smile. If you had told me a year ago that my son would be the one to buy out the company that discarded me like yesterday's trash, the company where I'd given 15 years of my life, I would have laughed through my tears. Because neither of us had even dreamed this was possible. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning it all began was deceptively ordinary. September. Sunshine streamed through my kitchen window as I sipped coffee and reviewed presentation notes one final time. Birds chirped outside, the neighbor's sprinkler ticked rhythmically against the fence, and my watch showed I had exactly 47 minutes before I needed to leave for the office. Everything seemed normal, predictable, under control. Exactly how I'd managed my life for nearly 2 decades. I straightened my navy blazer, the one with subtle pinstripes that always gave me a boost of confidence, and checked my reflection in the microwave door. At 48, I still looked professional, put together. The hint of silver threading through my dark brown hair didn't bother me anymore. I'd earned every one of those strands through years of late nights, impossible deadlines, and corporate firefighting. My mother had always told me that gray hair was just glitter showing a woman's experience. I liked that perspective, especially on days when I needed to command a room full of men who looked increasingly younger than me with each passing year. My name is Jennifer Keller. I'm a single mother with one brilliant son, a mortgage on a modest home in the Minneapolis suburbs, and until that day, I was the marketing director at Horizon Solutions, a mid-sized tech company that I had helped build from a scrappy startup to an industry contender. For 15 years, I had shaped our brand, nurtured our client relationships, and championed our company culture. Horizon wasn't just where I worked. It was part of my identity, woven into the fabric of who I'd become. The text message alert interrupted my mental rehearsal of the day's presentation. Tyler, checking in as he often did on important meeting days. "Knock 'em dead today, Mom. Call me after the Westfield pitch." I smiled, typing back quickly. "Will do, heading out soon. Love you." Tyler had always been my biggest cheerleader, even more so after his father walked out when Tyler was just 12. He'd watched me rebuild our lives, maintain our home, advance my career, all while never missing his soccer games or science competitions. We formed a team, the two of us against the world, and that bond had only strengthened as he grew into adulthood. Now 26, Tyler had carved his own path in tech, though in a different direction than my marketing expertise. He was some kind of programming prodigy, always had been, building apps in high school that his classmates actually used, launching small startups during college instead of partying. While I understood marketing strategy and client psychology, Tyler understood code and systems architecture in ways that seemed like wizardry to me. I grabbed my leather portfolio, a splurge I'd allowed myself after securing the Anderson account 3 years ago, and headed for the garage. The familiar routine felt comforting. Remote start the car, check that I had everything, lock the front door, drive the same route I'd taken for over a decade. I'd listened to the same morning news podcast, parked in the same section of the parking garage, and greeted the same security guard who'd worked the lobby desk since before I joined the company. "Morning, Ms. Keller," he said with a familiar nod. "Big day today, right? The Westfield presentation?" "That's right, Sam. Could be our biggest client yet." I smiled, touched that he remembered. These small connections, the human infrastructure behind corporate America, had always mattered to me. I made a point of knowing people's names, their children's milestones, their vacation plans. It wasn't strategy, it was just how my mother had raised me. People matter more than profits, though. I'd learned to deliver both. The elevator doors opened to the 14th floor, and immediately I sensed something was off. Conversations halted abruptly as I passed. A small cluster of junior staff dispersed when I approached the break room. Even Melissa, my assistant for the past 3 years, couldn't quite meet my eyes when she handed me my messages. "Everything okay?" I asked, pausing at her desk. "Fine," she said too quickly. "Just busy with the Westfield materials. Everything's ready in the main conference room." I nodded, not entirely convinced, but too focused on the upcoming presentation to investigate further. The Westfield contract would be transformative for Horizon, nearly double our largest existing client. I'd been cultivating this relationship for almost a year, carefully nurturing it from initial interest to serious consideration. Today's presentation needed to be flawless. As I settled into my office, I noticed small discrepancies that my normally observant nature had missed upon entry. The family photo that usually sat on my credenza was missing. The plant by the window, a peace lily that had survived my benign neglect for years, was gone. My awards, which had lined the floating shelf behind my desk, had been removed, leaving only faint dust outlines where they had stood. A cold sensation settled in my stomach, but I pushed it aside. There would be time to investigate after the presentation. Right now, Westfield needed my full attention. I spent the next hour reviewing slides, rehearsing key points, and mentally mapping contingency responses for potential questions. This was my element, the strategic space where I'd built my reputation and career. At precisely 9:55 a.m., I gathered my materials and headed for the main conference room. Richard Blackwell, our CEO of just 6 months, was already there, chatting with 2 younger men I didn't recognize. Richard had been brought in after our founder, David Mitchell, retired. He came from a larger competitor with a reputation for aggressive cost-cutting and modernization, corporate speak for replacing experienced employees with cheaper, younger versions. "Jennifer," Richard nodded, barely glancing up. "The Westfield team will be here any minute. This is Jason Miller, by the way. He's joined us as a strategic consultant." The younger man extended his hand. Princeton tie clip, expensive watch, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Pleasure to meet you, Jennifer. I've heard great things about your work." Something in his tone sent warning signals firing through my brain, but there was no time to process them. The receptionist was escorting the Westfield executive team through the door, and I shifted seamlessly into presentation mode. This was the performance I'd rehearsed, the culmination of months of strategy and relationship building. For the next 90 minutes, I led the discussion with well-practiced expertise. I highlighted how our solutions would integrate with their existing systems, demonstrated projected ROI figures, and addressed concerns before they could fully form. The Westfield team was engaged, asking thoughtful questions that indicated serious interest. Their CEO, Eleanor Winters, nodded appreciatively at several key points, a good sign from a woman notorious for her poker face during negotiations. "You've clearly done your homework, Jennifer," Eleanor said as we wrapped up. "This addresses exactly what we discussed in our initial meetings. I appreciate that level of attention to our specific needs." "That's our approach with all our clients," I replied. "We believe in customized solutions rather than one-size-fits-all packages." As the Westfield team gathered their materials, Eleanor pulled me aside briefly. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This looks promising, she said quietly. I'll need to discuss with my team, but I think we're close. I appreciate you taking the lead on this. It's refreshing to work with someone who actually listens. I thanked her, feeling the familiar satisfaction of a presentation gone right. As they left, Richard shook hands and made perfunctory comments about looking forward to their decision. Once they were gone, he turned to me with an unreadable expression. Good work, he said, though the words sounded hollow. Let's touch base after lunch. My office, 2 o'clock. I nodded, already mentally composing the follow-up email I would send to Eleanor, reinforcing key points while the presentation was still fresh. This was the critical window, maintaining momentum after a strong initial impression. The morning continued with routine tasks, returning emails, consulting with my team about upcoming campaigns, reviewing analytics from our most recent digital initiative. But the undercurrent of unease remained. More colleagues avoided eye contact. In the hallway, conversations ceased when I entered the break room, and when I returned from a quick lunch at my desk, I found Melissa packing her personal items into a small box. What's going on? I asked, alarmed. Her eyes were red-rimmed. They're restructuring the department. I've been reassigned to customer support. Her voice cracked slightly. Effective immediately. Anger flared in my chest. Who authorized this? You're critical to our marketing operations. She just shook her head, unwilling or unable to say more. By the time 2 o'clock arrived, my professional instincts were screaming warnings. I knocked on Richard's office door with a sense of foreboding that had been building all day. Come in, he called. I entered to find not just Richard, but Sarah Pembroke from HR seated across from his desk. A folder lay closed between them. Neither smiled. Take a seat, Jennifer, Richard said, gesturing to the empty chair beside Sarah. I remained standing. What's this about? Richard sighed theatrically. We're making some organizational changes as part of our strategic realignment. As we've discussed previously, Horizon needs to streamline operations to remain competitive in the current market. We had discussed no such thing, but I didn't interrupt. After careful consideration, he continued, we've determined that your position as marketing director will be eliminated as part of this restructuring. The words hung in the air, clinical and devastating. 15 years of dedication reduced to corporate jargon designed to obscure the simple truth. I was being fired. The Westfield account, I said, finding my voice. They're ready to sign. Eleanor just told me. Jason will be taking the lead on that transition, Richard cut in smoothly. He'll ensure continuity for the client. Jason, the strategic consultant who had materialized this morning. Younger, male, probably cheaper. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Sarah pushed the folder toward me. This contains your severance information. We're offering 3 months, which is generous considering current industry standards. There's also information about Cobra for your health insurance continuation. 3 months, after 15 years. I'd like you to clean out your personal items today, Richard added. Mark from accounting will assist you. Mark, the office gossip who had been angling for a management position for years. The thought of him supervising my departure made my stomach twist. This is because of my age, isn't it? The words escaped, before I could censor them. Richard's expression hardened. This is purely a business decision, Jennifer. Your performance has been satisfactory, but we're moving in a direction that requires different skill sets. Different skill sets, like being 32 instead of 48, like having a Y chromosome, like costing less and questioning less. I wanted to argue, to remind him of my consistent results, my institutional knowledge, my relationships with clients who trusted me. But the decision had clearly been made long before I walked into this office. Perhaps before the Westfield presentation. Perhaps before I'd even arrived at work today. "I'll need boxes," I said instead, my voice steadier than I felt. Sarah stood. "Mark has those ready. I'll walk you to your office." The next hour passed, in a blur of humiliation. Mark appeared with empty printer paper boxes, his expression a poorly concealed mixture of sympathy and schadenfreude. Colleagues walked by my open door, some averting their eyes, others stealing curious glances as I packed 15 years into cardboard containers. My awards, my reference books, the mug Tyler had given me when he graduated college, inscribed with, "Thanks for making it possible." As I placed the final items into the last box, Jason appeared in my doorway. "Do you have the Westfield notes?" he asked, as casually as if he were borrowing a stapler. I looked up slowly. "The presentation materials are on the shared drive." "I meant your personal insights, the things you've gathered during your conversations with them. Eleanor seems to respond well to you." The audacity was breathtaking. He wanted the benefit of my experience, my relationship building, my interpersonal intelligence, after the company had decided I was disposable. "You'll have to develop your own insights," I replied evenly. "That's part of the job." His smile faltered. "Look, this isn't personal. It's just business evolution. The experienced making way for new approaches." I stood and faced him directly. "Then evolve without my notes." He left without another word, clearly unprepared for even this small resistance. Mark returned as I was placing the last framed photo into my box. "Cars pulled up to the service entrance," he said, not unkindly. "Thought you might prefer that to walking through the lobby." A small mercy, but one I accepted with a nod. No need to parade my professional execution before the entire office. As we waited for the elevator, Mark cleared his throat awkwardly. "For what it's worth, I think this is a mistake. The Andersons only stay with us because of their relationship with you." "Then perhaps you should mention that to Richard," I replied, though we both knew he wouldn't. The elevator doors opened, and we descended in silence to the service area where a company car waited. The driver, another familiar face whose name I now couldn't recall through the fog of shock, helped load my boxes into the trunk. I handed Mark my badge and keycard. "Good luck, Jennifer," he said, already turning back toward the building. The ride home passed in numbed silence. The driver attempted small talk, but eventually respected my quiet. When we arrived at my house, he helped carry the boxes to my front porch, accepted my subdued thanks, and departed with an awkward half-wave. I stood there in my professional attire, the navy blazer, the pencil skirt, the sensible heels, surrounded by cardboard boxes containing the artifacts of my career, wondering what exactly I was supposed to do next. It was 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I should have been preparing follow-up communications to Westfield, not standing on my porch like a refugee from corporate America. With robotic movements, I carried the boxes inside one by one. I placed them in the den, not ready to unpack them or even look at their contents. Then I sat at my kitchen counter, staring at nothing in particular as the afternoon light shifted across the floor. My phone buzzed with Tyler's text. "How did the presentation go? Knock their socks off?" I placed the phone face down without responding. I couldn't form the words yet, couldn't make it real by sharing it with the person who had watched me build my career with such pride. Minutes stretched into hours. The sun set. The automatic porch light clicked on. Still, I sat motionless, trying to process what had happened. Not just today, but over the past 6 months since Richard had taken over. The subtle shifts in culture, the gradual sidelining of experienced staff, the increasing deference to youth over expertise. I had seen it happening to others, but had somehow believed my position was secure. After all, I consistently delivered results. My clients loved working with me. I had helped build Horizon from a struggling startup to a respected industry name. None of that had mattered in the end. The doorbell rang, startling me from my trance. Through the peephole, I saw Tyler standing on the porch, concern etched on his features. Of course he would come when I didn't answer his messages. That was who he was, direct, caring, unwilling to let silence stand as a response. I opened the door, and his expression shifted from worry to alarm as he took in my appearance. "Mom? What happened?" The simple question broke the dam. Tears I had refused to shed in that sterile conference room or under Mark's watchful eye now flowed freely. Tyler stepped forward immediately, wrapping me in a tight hug that felt like the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly turned liquid and unstable. "They fired me," I managed between sobs, "after the Westfield presentation, after 15 years. Tyler guided me to the living room sofa, his arm never leaving my shoulders. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer immediate platitudes or solutions. He just listened as the whole story poured out. The morning's warning signs, the presentation that had gone so well, Richard's cold dismissal, the humiliation of packing my office while colleagues watched, the final indignity of being escorted out through the service entrance. When I finally fell silent, emotionally exhausted, Tyler's expression had transformed from concern to something harder, more focused. "Did they give you severance?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. 3 months, and I have to sign away, my right to sue for age discrimination to get it. He nodded slowly. "Don't sign anything yet. Not until we've had time to think this through." "I need the money, Tyler. I have a mortgage, health insurance." "I know." He squeezed my shoulder. "But just give it a few days. They're not expecting you to return the paperwork immediately. Let's make sure we understand all the implications first." His calm practicality was so like him. While I processed the emotional impact, he was already analyzing the situation from multiple angles. It had always been that way, my heart leading, his mind calculating, both of us stronger together than apart. "Have you eaten?" he asked, already knowing the answer. I shook my head. "I'll order something." He pulled out his phone. "Thai? From that place on Lexington?" It was our comfort food, our celebration meal, our tradition since he was old enough to develop preferences beyond chicken nuggets. I nodded, grateful for the familiar ritual in a day that had shattered all routine. While we waited for the food to arrive, Tyler moved my boxes from the den to the garage. "You don't need to look at these tonight," he said simply. "They'll be there when you're ready." After dinner, as we sat with mugs of tea that neither of us was drinking, Tyler finally asked the question I'd been dreading. "What will you do now?" It hung in the air between us, impossibly large. What would I do now? At 48, in an industry that worshipped youth and innovation, with a resume that showed loyalty to one company, a loyalty that had not been reciprocated, every career article I'd read in recent years flashed through my mind, warning about the danger of staying too long in one position, becoming too specialized, failing to reinvent oneself every few years. "I don't know," I admitted. "Look for another position, I guess. Update my LinkedIn, reach out to contacts." Even as I said the words, I knew how inadequate they were. My contacts were mostly within Horizon or its client base, relationships I had nurtured over years, but that might not translate to external opportunities. My LinkedIn profile hadn't been updated in years because I'd had no reason to maintain it. I had been so focused on building Horizon's future that I had neglected to secure my own. Tyler studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. "What? If there was another option?" he asked carefully. "Like what? Starting over at entry level somewhere? Freelancing? Trying to consult without a client base?" He shook his head. "No, something else entirely." He hesitated, then continued with uncharacteristic uncertainty. "Remember that algorithm I developed my senior year? The one for predicting consumer behavior based on subtle online indicators? I nodded. It had been his senior project. Impressive but theoretical, or so I had thought. I sold it last year, he said quietly, to Amazon. I blinked, processing this. You sold? Wait, what? Amazon? When? Why didn't you tell me? He shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. It all happened quickly. They approached me through a third party. By the time I realized how serious they were, we were already in negotiations. And then there were NDAs, legal reviews. It was intense. I wanted to tell you once everything was finalized, but... But what? He met my eyes directly. But I didn't want you to worry about me anymore. You've spent my whole life putting me first, making sure I had opportunities, sacrificing for my education. I wanted to handle this myself, prove I could navigate it without relying on you. Tyler, I'm your mother. You're not a burden. I know. He smiled slightly. But sometimes the child wants to protect the parent too. My heart squeezed at his words, at the man he had become while I was busy earning a living and creating a home. When had my boy developed this quiet strength, this thoughtful consideration? So you sold your algorithm, I prompted, bringing us back to the revelation at hand. Tyler nodded. For enough that I don't have to worry about money for a very long time, and enough to start something new. He leaned forward, his eyes brightening with the passion he always showed when discussing his projects. I've been building a company, Mom, a real one, not just a side project or app experiment. Nexus Ventures. We acquire underperforming tech companies with good foundations but poor leadership. We restructure them, revitalize them, and either spin them off or integrate them into our growing ecosystem. I stared at him, struggling to reconcile this information with the son who still left his laundry in the dryer and forgot to water plants when he house sit. You've been buying companies? Plural? How did I not know this? He smiled sheepishly. I've been pretty quiet about it. We operate mostly behind holding companies and investment consortiums. The press hasn't picked up on it yet because we're deliberately keeping a low profile until we're ready to announce our full portfolio. And this relates to my situation, how exactly? Tyler's expression shifted again, determination replacing the earlier vulnerability. Horizon has been on our radar for months, Mom, ever since Richard took over and started implementing his strategic realignment. The company is undervalued right now because of poor leadership decisions, but its core business model and client base remain strong. Understanding dawned slowly. You want to acquire Horizon? He nodded. We've already started the process. We've been quietly buying shares when they become available. We've met with several board members who are concerned about the company's direction under Richard. And now, with what happened today? He trailed off, his implication clear. You want to use my firing as leverage, I said, not quite a question. I want to use your experience as guidance, he corrected. You know Horizon better than anyone, its strengths, its weaknesses, its potential. You built relationships with clients who trust you, not the company logo. And now Richard has handed us the perfect opportunity by discarding the very person who could have helped him succeed. I sat back, my mind racing. This was too much to process after the day's emotional avalanche. My son, secretly building a business empire while I thought he was just working on another tech startup. Horizon, potentially changing hands. The possibility of. What exactly? What are you suggesting, Tyler? That I help you buy the company that just fired me? I'm suggesting, he said carefully, that we consider all options before you make any decisions about your next steps. Nexus Ventures is happening with or without Horizon. But with your industry knowledge and my technical expertise, we could create something remarkable together. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw not just the boy I had raised, but the man he had become. Confident, but not arrogant. Strategic, but not calculating. Ambitious, but still guided by the values I had tried to instill. I need time to think, I said finally. This is a lot. He nodded, understanding. Take all the time you need. The severance paperwork can wait a few days. And, Mom? He reached across the table to squeeze my hand. Regardless of what you decide about Nexus, you're going to be okay. Better than okay. This isn't the end of your career. It might just be the beginning of something you never imagined. As he left that night, promising to return in the morning, I stood in my doorway watching his taillights disappear down the street. The emptiness I had felt earlier had been replaced by something else. Not certainty, not even hope exactly, but possibility. The day had begun with the destruction of one future I had imagined for myself. It was ending with the outline of another I had never considered. I closed the door and walked slowly through my quiet house, seeing it with new eyes. The photos of Tyler's graduation. The awards dinner where I'd been recognized for the Anderson campaign. The weekend trips we'd managed despite my demanding schedule. 15 years at Horizon had shaped my life, defined my professional identity, but it had never been the sum total of who I was. My gaze fell on a small frame on the bookshelf, a quote Tyler had given me when he left for college. The best is not behind you. It's yet to come. Maybe, just maybe, he had been right all along. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake watching shadows move across my ceiling, my mind cycling through the day's events like a relentless slideshow. The moment Richard's expression shifted from professional to dismissive. The carefully neutral face Sarah from HR maintained as she pushed severance papers across the table. Mark hovering at my office door, pretending sympathy while inventorying my belongings. The boxes in, my garage containing 15 years of professional life, and then Tyler's revelation. My son, my child, who I had raised alone after his father decided family life wasn't compatible with his midlife awakening, had quietly built something I couldn't even comprehend. While I had been fighting for recognition in conference rooms, he had been acquiring companies. While I had been mentoring junior staff who would eventually take my position, he had been planning a business empire. I rose at dawn, exhausted but unable to remain in bed any longer. The house felt unnaturally quiet, the absence of morning preparation for work creating a void I didn't know how to fill. No emails to check, no meetings to prepare for, no client calls to return, just empty hours stretching ahead with no structure or purpose. I made coffee, the familiar ritual providing some comfort in its normalcy. As I stood at the kitchen window watching early light filter through maple leaves, my phone rang. Eleanor Winters, Westfield's CEO. I hesitated, uncertain whether to answer. What could I possibly say? That I no longer represented Horizon? That the company had disposed of me hours after I'd secured their interest? The phone continued ringing, demanding response. "Hello, Eleanor," I answered, striving for professionalism despite everything. "Jennifer," she responded, her voice carrying its usual direct tone. "I'm calling about yesterday's presentation." "Yes?" My heart pounded as I searched for appropriate words to explain my sudden departure. "We're prepared to move forward, but I want to work directly with you on implementation. Your understanding of our needs impressed my team." The irony was almost physically painful. "I appreciate that, Eleanor, but I should inform you that I'm no longer with Horizon. Yesterday was my last day." Silence stretched across the line. Then, "I see. That's unexpected. May I ask why?" "Organizational restructuring," I replied, the corporate euphemism tasting bitter on my tongue. Another pause. "That seems ill-timed considering our potential partnership." Her tone had cooled noticeably. "Who will be managing our account?" "Jason Miller has been designated as the transition contact." The young man who didn't speak during the presentation? The one checking his phone under the table? I hadn't noticed that detail, but it didn't surprise me. Yes, that's him. Eleanor sighed, the sound carrying her disappointment clearly. Jennifer, I'm going to be direct. Westfield was prepared to sign with Horizon largely because of you. My team was impressed by your presentation, but we were more impressed by your understanding of our challenges, developed over our months of conversation. This changes the equation considerably. I understand, I said, unsure what else to offer. Do you have plans for your next position? She asked, catching me off guard. It's still under consideration. Tyler's proposition flashed through my mind. When you decide, I'd appreciate a call. Westfield is always interested in working with professionals who understand our business. She paused. And Jennifer, their loss. As the call ended, I sat heavily at my kitchen table, Eleanor's words echoing. Their loss. A simple acknowledgement that what Horizon had discarded still held value. The professional validation pierced through the numbing shock that had enveloped me since yesterday's dismissal, allowing anger to seep through. They had tossed aside 15 years of institutional knowledge, client relationships, and proven results. For what? To save on salary costs? To appear more innovative with younger leadership? To satisfy Richard's apparent need to surround himself with admiring copies of himself? The doorbell interrupted my building indignation. Tyler stood on the porch holding a bakery box and a folder tucked under his arm. Brought breakfast, he said, lifting the box. And information. We settled at the kitchen table with coffee and pastries. Neither of us seemed particularly interested in eating. Tyler opened the folder containing printouts of financial reports, news articles, and what appeared to be internal Horizon documents. How did you get these? I asked, recognizing confidential quarterly projections. We have sources, he replied vaguely. The point is, Horizon's in trouble, deeper than most employees realize. Richard's restructuring isn't just about modernizing, it's damage control. I examined the papers, my marketing director's eye quickly identifying concerning trends. Client retention had dropped 22% since Richard took over. New account acquisition was down 17%. Operating costs had increased despite staff reductions. The Anderson account is considering leaving, I noted, spotting their name on a risk assessment document. They've been with us for 7 years. Tyler nodded. Richard doesn't understand relationship-based business. He's applying cost-cutting formulas from his previous company without recognizing that Horizon's strength was always its client service model, the model you helped build. Does the board know how bad it is? Some suspect, but Richard's controlling the narrative. He's blaming the downturn on outdated processes and resistance to change from veteran employees. The implication was clear. People like me were being positioned as the problem rather than the solution. So your interest in acquiring Horizon isn't just about my situation, I observed. It never was, Tyler confirmed. We've been watching. For months. Richard's approach is textbook strip mining. Cut experienced staff, reduce service quality, maximize short-term profits while destroying long-term value. The company's vulnerable now. Its stock price is down, its reputation is suffering, and key personnel are leaving, whether voluntarily or not. I studied my son across the table, seeing him with new eyes. The strategic thinker, the patient planner, the person who could see patterns in chaos and opportunity in crisis. When had he developed these abilities? This confidence? What exactly are you proposing? I asked. Tyler straightened, shifting from concerned son to business strategist. Nexus Ventures makes an offer to Horizon's board. Given the company's declining performance, we'll propose a figure that's fair but reflects current realities. Several board members are already concerned about Richard's leadership. They'll be receptive. And if the acquisition succeeds? We implement a recovery strategy, he continued. Stabilize client relationships, rehire key personnel who've been let go, refocus on the service model that built Horizon's reputation. There's a solid foundation there. It's just being dismantled by someone who doesn't understand its value. The plan was sound, logical, potentially profitable. But one question remained unanswered. And my role in all this? Tyler met my gaze directly. That depends on what you want, Mom. You could consult, sharing your institutional knowledge but maintaining distance. You could take a formal position within the restructured company. Or you could walk away entirely and pursue something completely different. I'd support any of those choices. His words awakened something that yesterday's humiliation had temporarily smothered: agency, choice. The recognition that while Horizon had rejected me, I wasn't defined by that rejection. I could choose my response rather than merely react to circumstances others had created. I need to think, I said finally. This isn't just about business for me. It's personal. Tyler nodded. Take all the time you need. The severance offer gives us a window. They're not expecting an immediate response. As he gathered the documents, preparing to leave for meetings he wouldn't elaborate on, I was struck by the role reversal. My son reassuring me, my son creating opportunities rather than requiring them, my son standing strong while I found my footing. Tyler, I called as he reached the door. When did you become this person? This businessman? He smiled, a glimpse of the boy still visible within the man. I had a good teacher, someone who showed me that success isn't just about profit. It's about building something worthwhile, treating people with respect, and standing by your principles even when it's difficult. He shrugged. I was paying attention. After he left, I moved through my house aimlessly, trying to process everything. The professional devastation, the personal humiliation, the unexpected opportunity emerging from both. My gaze caught on the home office I rarely used. A small room I'd furnished with a desk and bookshelves, but treated more as storage than workspace. Horizon's offices had been my true professional home. With sudden purpose, I began clearing the space. I emptied drawers of accumulated papers, dusted shelves that had gathered neglect, and rearranged furniture to create a proper working environment. When the room was prepared, I retrieved one box from the garage, not my awards or office decor, but my client files, contact information, and project notes. Resources not for mourning what I'd lost, but for building whatever came next. By evening, I had created a spreadsheet documenting every major Horizon client, their history with the company, key contacts, and potential vulnerabilities under the new leadership. If Tyler's acquisition plan proceeded, this information would be valuable. If not, it represented 15 years of professional connections, relationships that might offer pathways to my next opportunity. The work provided focus, purpose, and distraction from the emotional aftermath of dismissal. I was midway through analyzing the Anderson account's service history when my phone rang again. An unfamiliar number. Jennifer Keller, I answered. Automatically. Ms. Keller, this is William Davies from Davies, Prescott & Associates. I understand you were terminated from Horizon Solutions yesterday. My guard immediately rose. May I ask how you obtained that information and why you're calling? I apologize for the intrusion, he replied, his tone professional but warm. Eleanor Winters suggested I contact you. I'm an executive recruiter specializing in marketing leadership positions. Eleanor speaks very highly of your capabilities and mentioned you might be available for new opportunities. Eleanor. The connection registered immediately. She hadn't just offered professional validation, she'd actively advocated for me. I appreciate the outreach, I said carefully. I'm still evaluating my options, but I'd be happy to learn more about what you're considering. Excellent. I have several clients who've expressed interest in marketing directors with significant tech industry experience. Would you be available for a preliminary discussion tomorrow? Perhaps coffee at 10? We arranged details, and as I hung up, another piece of my shattered professional identity clicked back into place. I was still marketable, still valuable. One door had closed, but others were already opening. Doors I hadn't even known existed while ensconced in Horizon's familiar corridors. That night, Tyler called with an update. The board's quarterly review is scheduled for next Friday. He said without preamble. Richard will have to present the financial results, which aren't pretty. It's the perfect opportunity for our offer. That's only 9 days away, I noted. Can you prepare everything in time? We've been preparing for months, Tyler reminded me. But having your insider perspective would strengthen our position considerably. Have you given more thought to your involvement? I considered the spreadsheets I'd created that afternoon, the recruiter's call, Eleanor's vote of confidence. I'm still processing options, I admitted. But I've started compiling information that might be useful: client histories, relationship vulnerabilities, institutional knowledge that left when I did. That's exactly what we need, Tyler said, his voice brightening. Listen, we're having a strategy session tomorrow afternoon. Why don't you join us? No commitment, just share your insights. Meet the team. The invitation prompted both interest and anxiety. I was curious about Tyler's business, the people he'd assembled, the operation he'd built without my knowledge. But I also recognized that stepping into that room would mean facing a new reality, one where I wasn't the experienced mentor, but potentially the wounded newcomer seeking direction. I'll be there, I said, choosing curiosity over fear. The address Tyler provided led to a converted warehouse in Minneapolis's North Loop district, all exposed brick, industrial windows, and minimalist signage. The reception area featured polished concrete floors, Danish modern furniture, and a young woman with purple-tipped hair who greeted me by name before I could introduce myself. Ms. Keller, we've been expecting you. I'm Zoe. Tyler's in the main conference room with the team. Can I get you anything before you join them? Her warmth eased some of my tension. I'm fine, thank you. And please, call me Jennifer. Zoe led me through an open office space where approximately 20 people worked at clustered desks. The atmosphere was focused, but not rigid, collaborative conversation mixed with individual concentration. No sterile cubicles, no corner offices, no hierarchical signaling beyond functional work areas. The conference room occupied the far corner, its glass walls currently frosted for privacy. As Zoe opened the door, I steeled myself for the unfamiliar role of outsider in my son's professional domain. 8 people sat around a reclaimed wood table, including Tyler at the head. He rose immediately. Mom, Jennifer, thanks for coming. His momentary slip between personal and professional address acknowledged the unusual situation. Everyone, this is Jennifer Keller, former marketing director at Horizon and our expert consultant for this acquisition. The introduction granted me immediate status, positioning me as contributor rather than supplicant. I recognized Tyler's intentional framing, protecting my dignity while establishing my value to the team. Quick introductions followed. Meera Patel, Operations Director. David Chen, Financial Strategist. Keisha Washington, Legal Counsel. Aidan O'Brien, Technical Assessment. Rafael Dominguez, Client Relations. Emma Thompson, Human Resources. James Wilson, Communications Director. Each greeted me with genuine interest rather than perfunctory acknowledgement. We were just reviewing Horizon's public financial statements, Tyler explained, gesturing to the projection screen where familiar reports were displayed. Any insights on what might not be reflected in these numbers? The question invited my expertise, creating space for contribution. I settled into an available chair and studied the data briefly. The client retention metrics are worse than they appear, I began. These figures include renewed contracts, but don't reflect reduced service levels within those renewals. For instance, the Anderson account renewed last quarter, but decreased their service package by approximately 30%. They're testing alternative providers while maintaining minimal engagement with Horizon as backup. Heads nodded around the table. Raphael made notes. Tyler smiled slightly. Proud, I realized. Also, I continued, warming to my subject, these projected new business figures are wildly optimistic. They assume conversion of at least 4 major prospects, including Westfield, who have likely reconsidered after my departure. For the next hour, I answered questions, offered context, and provided nuance that transformed abstract data into actionable intelligence. The team was sharp, asking incisive questions that revealed their thorough preparation. They had done their homework on Horizon, but my 15 years of insider knowledge filled crucial gaps in their understanding. As the meeting concluded, Tyler looked around the table. Next steps? David? The financial strategist consulted his notes. We finalized the offer based on revised projections. Given what we've learned today, I recommend adjusting our initial figure downward by 7–10%. Horizon's position is weaker than publicly reported. Tyler nodded. Keisha? The attorney straightened. I'll update the proposal documents to reflect our concerns about unreported client retention issues. That strengthens our negotiating position if they push back on the adjusted offer. Raphael? I'll prepare outreach strategies for key clients, prioritizing those with immediate flight risk like Anderson and Westfield. We need to be ready to stabilize relationships immediately post-acquisition. Tyler turned to me. Jennifer, what else should we be considering from your perspective? The question positioned me as essential rather than supplementary, acknowledging my unique vantage point. I considered carefully before responding. Personnel recovery should be a priority, I said finally. Richard's cuts eliminated institutional knowledge along with salary expenses. Several people who've been let go hold client relationships and operational understanding that would accelerate stabilization efforts. Emma, the HR director, nodded vigorously. Excellent point. Would you be willing to identify these key personnel so we can prepare appropriate outreach? Absolutely, I agreed, mentally cataloging former colleagues whose talents had been discarded during Richard's restructuring. As the meeting dispersed, Tyler remained seated, watching me with undisguised interest. Thoughts? He asked when we were alone. I considered the experience, the professionalism, the preparation, the respect with which my contributions had been received. You've built something impressive, I acknowledged. Your team is remarkably cohesive for a relatively new operation. We've been deliberate about culture from the beginning, he explained. Technical skills matter, but alignment on values matters more. Everyone here believes in revitalizing companies with good foundations rather than strip mining them for quick profits. It shows. I paused, processing the day's revelations. I met with William Davies this morning. The recruiter Eleanor Winters recommended. Tyler's expression revealed nothing. And? He has 3 positions that might be appropriate. Senior marketing roles at established firms, good compensation, reasonable expectations, respectable companies. Are you interested? I sighed, finally confronting the question I'd been avoiding. They're safe options, familiar territory. But after today, I gestured around the conference room. This feels different, challenging, potentially more meaningful. Tyler nodded slowly. It would be. We're not just acquiring companies. We're reimagining how they operate, ensuring they serve both customers and employees ethically. It's harder than traditional corporate paths, but the impact is greater. And if the Horizon acquisition doesn't succeed, then we move forward with other targets. Nexus isn't dependent on any single acquisition. He leaned forward. But I believe this one will succeed. Richard's leadership is already raising concerns among board members. Our timing is strategic. I studied my son, confident, purposeful, visionary, the child I had raised becoming someone I could learn from. The reversal was simultaneously disorienting and affirming. I'll need a formal role, I said finally. Not just consultant or Tyler's mother, something that reflects my experience and contributions. His face brightened. Absolutely. What are you thinking? Client retention strategist to start, with potential expansion as we stabilize operations. I want to focus on rebuilding damaged relationships and strengthening vulnerable ones. Perfect alignment with our needs, Tyler agreed. And compensation? I named a figure 15% higher than my Horizon salary. Tyler didn't blink. Done. When can you start? I already have, I replied, thinking of the spreadsheets and analyses I'd been developing since yesterday. But I'm not signing Horizon's severance agreement. If we're doing this, we're doing it cleanly. Tyler grinned. I was hoping you'd say that. The non-compete clause would have complicated matters. As we left the office together, I experienced a sensation I hadn't felt since yesterday's dismissal: anticipation. Not just for potential revenge or vindication, though both elements undeniably existed, but for the opportunity to build something meaningful from the ashes of what had been destroyed. The next week passed in a whirlwind of preparation. I divided my time between Nexus's offices, contributing to acquisition planning, and my home office, where I methodically documented Horizon's vulnerable client relationships. The work provided purpose, structure, and healing. Each spreadsheet, each analysis, each strategic recommendation restored pieces of professional identity that Richard's dismissal had fractured. Tyler's team welcomed my involvement without reservation. They solicited my input, incorporated my suggestions, and treated me as a valuable colleague rather than the boss's mother. In their company, I began to recognize that what I had perceived as the end of my career might actually be its evolution. A transition rather than a termination. The day before the board meeting, Tyler called an all-hands session to review final preparations. The conference room was packed, energy high as team members reported readiness in their respective areas. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., Richard presents quarterly. Results to Horizon's board, Tyler summarized. At 2 p.m., our representatives meet with the board to present our offer. By close of business, we'll likely know whether the acquisition will proceed. He looked around the room. Questions? Concerns? Raphael raised his hand. What if Richard somehow produces better numbers than we're expecting? Unlikely, David replied. Our financial analysis is based on verified data. He might attempt to present optimistic projections, but the current quarter's performance is already documented. Other concerns? Tyler prompted. I spoke up. We should prepare for Richard to undermine any board interest by suggesting the company just needs more time for his strategies to take effect. He'll promise improvement in the coming quarter if they remain patient. Tyler nodded. Good point. Keisha, can you strengthen the urgency aspects of our presentation? Emphasize deteriorating client relationships that won't survive another quarter. Of neglect? The attorney made notes. Already on it. As the meeting concluded, Tyler held me back with a gentle touch to my arm. When the room had cleared, he closed the door. There's something we haven't discussed, he said, uncharacteristically hesitant. If the acquisition succeeds, Richard and his leadership team will be removed immediately. Someone will need to address the staff, explain what's happening, provide reassurance, establish new direction. I immediately understood his concern. And you're worried how they'll respond to unfamiliar leadership. He nodded. These employees have been through months of uncertainty and cuts. They need to hear from someone they trust, someone who represents both Horizon's past achievements and its future potential. The implication was clear. You want me to speak to them. You're the perfect bridge figure, Tyler confirmed. You understand Horizon's culture, you know the employees personally, and you represent continuity despite recent disruptions. Your return would signal that we value what made the company successful before Richard's changes. The prospect was both appealing and intimidating. Returning to Horizon in triumph rather than humiliation. Addressing colleagues who had witnessed my unceremonious departure. Representing the new ownership that would determine their professional futures. What would Richard's face look like, I wonder, I mused, when he realizes what's happening? Tyler's expression hardened slightly. He'll be informed of the board's decision immediately before the general announcement. His access to systems will be suspended during that conversation. Standard corporate protocol for executive removal. The same procedure undoubtedly used when removing me and others who had built the company. The symmetry held poetic justice, though I found less satisfaction in it than I might have expected. I'll speak to the staff, I agreed, but I want to emphasize continuity and stability rather than conquest. These are colleagues, not spoils of war. Tyler smiled, a genuine expression that softened his business demeanor. That's exactly why you're the right person for this role. You see the humans behind the organizational chart. That night, sleep again proved elusive. I mentally rehearsed potential scenarios for the coming day. The board accepting our offer, Richard learning of his displacement, addressing staff who had watched me leave in disgrace mere days earlier. Each possibility carried emotional complexity beyond the business transactions involved. When morning arrived, I dressed carefully in a crimson suit I'd purchased for the occasion. Bold, confident, nothing like the conservative navy and gray palette that had dominated my Horizon wardrobe. As I applied makeup with more attention than usual, I acknowledged that today wasn't just about business strategy. It was about reclaiming narrative, transforming from discarded resource to returning leader. Tyler called at 9:30. Richard's presentation to the board is underway. Our sources say it's not going well. He's facing difficult questions about client retention and staff turnover. As expected, I noted, a hint of satisfaction creeping into my voice despite attempts at professional detachment. Our meeting's still scheduled for 2 p.m. I'll update you as soon as we have news. The intervening hours stretched interminably. I reviewed notes, checked emails, reorganized my home office, anything to channel nervous energy. At 1:45, I positioned myself near the phone, attempting casual productivity while hyper-aware of each passing minute. The call came at 3:17 p.m. Tyler's name flashed on the screen. "It's done," he said without preamble. The board accepted our offer unanimously. Richard's being informed now. We address staff at 4:30. Reality crystallized in those simple statements. Horizon Solutions, the company I had helped build over 15 years, now belonged to my son's firm. Richard Blackwell, who had dismissed me with corporate platitudes about restructuring, was himself being restructured out of leadership. And I would return to address former colleagues not as discarded talent, but as representative of new ownership. "I'll meet you there," I replied, surprised by my steady voice despite the emotional turbulence beneath. The drive to Horizon's offices passed in contemplative silence. I parked in the visitors section rather than the executive spaces I had previously used, a small detail that emphasized my transformed relationship with the familiar building. As I approached the entrance, Tyler waited outside, impeccably dressed, in a charcoal suit that conveyed authority without ostentation. "Ready?" he asked simply. I nodded, suppressing complicated emotions as we entered together. The lobby security guard, Sam, whose children's names and ages I still remembered, recognized me immediately. His expression registered surprise, confusion, and then something approaching satisfaction as Tyler identified himself as representing the new ownership. "Welcome back, Ms. Keller," Sam said with undisguised approval, words already spreading about changes upstairs. We rode the elevator in silence, the familiar ascent now laden with new significance. When the doors opened on the 14th floor, Raphael and Keisha waited near the reception desk, professional and composed despite the charged atmosphere. "Richard's been escorted out," Raphael reported quietly. "His access has been terminated. Department heads have been notified of a mandatory all-staff meeting in the main conference room at 4:30. "Any issues?" Tyler asked. Keisha shook her head. He was stunned, but not combative. The board chair handled the conversation professionally. "Security is standing by, but there's been no need for intervention." I glanced around the familiar space, noting subtle changes since my departure. Motivational posters featuring Richard's preferred corporate platitudes now decorated walls that had previously showcased client success stories. The reception area's comfortable seating had been replaced with sleeker, less inviting furniture. Small alterations that reflected larger philosophical shifts in company culture. As 4:30 approached, employees began moving toward the conference room, expressions ranging from anxious to curious. I recognized faces, people I had hired, mentored, collaborated with for years. Some noticed me with visible surprise. Others whispered to colleagues, speculation spreading through gestures and murmurs. We waited in the adjacent office until the appointed time. Through the glass partition, I could see the conference room filling beyond capacity, staff members, standing along walls when seating was exhausted. Everyone appeared tense, braced for more unwelcome announcements following months of restructuring communications. "Ready?" Tyler asked as the clock reached 4:30. I smoothed my crimson jacket and nodded. "Ready." We entered together, followed by Raphael and Keisha. The room fell immediately silent, all eyes tracking our progress to the front. I scanned familiar faces. Melissa, my former assistant, now working in customer support. James from design, whose innovative approach to the Anderson campaign had secured their business. Priya from development, whose technical expertise had saved countless projects from disaster. Tyler stepped forward first. "Good afternoon. I'm Tyler Williams, CEO of Nexus Ventures. As of 3 p.m. today, Nexus has acquired Horizon Solutions from its previous ownership. This transition has been approved unanimously by the board of directors and takes effect immediately." The announcement generated immediate reaction. Whispers, glances, one audible, "What?" from the back of the room. Tyler allowed a moment for the information to register before continuing. "I understand this news comes as a surprise. You've already experienced significant changes in recent months, and unexpected transitions create natural concern. That's why I've asked someone who knows Horizon, its history, its strengths, its people, to address you directly." He turned toward me. "Many of you already know Jennifer Keller." As I stepped forward, the whispers intensified. Recognition dawned across faces. The marketing director, who had departed so abruptly just days earlier, now returning alongside new ownership. The narrative connection was unmistakable even before explanation. "For 15 years, I began, my voice steadier than I had anticipated. I had the privilege of working with many of you to build Horizon Solutions from a promising startup to a respected industry name. Together, we created something valuable, not just financially successful, but meaningful. A company that served clients with integrity, valued employee contributions, and produced quality work we could all be proud of." Heads nodded around the room. This was the Horizon they remembered, the company that had existed before Richard's modernization efforts. "Recent months have brought difficult changes," I continued. "Many talented colleagues have departed, some by choice, others through restructuring decisions." The euphemism generated knowing expressions. Client relationships have suffered. The culture that distinguished Horizon has been eroded. These changes weren't necessary evolution, they were misguided direction. More nods, some particularly vigorous. Richard's approach had found few genuine supporters among staff who had experienced Horizon's previous culture. Nexus Ventures has acquired Horizon not to continue that dismantling, but to restore and build upon the foundation that made this company successful. Their leadership philosophy emphasizes client relationships, employee development, and sustainable growth rather than short-term metrics at the expense of long-term value. I gestured toward Tyler, who stepped forward again. "Our immediate priority is stabilization," he explained. "No additional staff reductions are planned. In fact, we'll be inviting several recently departed employees to return in the coming weeks. Client relationships will receive immediate attention to address concerns that have developed during the transition period." The tension in the room visibly diminished, shoulders relaxed, expressions softened from anxiety toward cautious optimism. "We'll be scheduling department meetings throughout tomorrow to discuss specific plans and address your questions directly," Tyler continued. "For today, we simply want to introduce ourselves, explain the transition, and assure you that Horizon's future involves building upon its strengths rather than dismantling them." As the formal announcement concluded, employees approached in waves, first those I had worked with most closely, then others drawn by the energy of reunion and curiosity about new leadership. Questions ranged from practical concerns about operational changes to personal inquiries about my unexpected return. I navigated these conversations carefully, balancing enthusiasm for Horizon's new direction with appropriate professional boundaries. I wasn't returning as marketing director, but as client retention strategist, a distinction that established both continuity and evolution in my relationship with the company. As the impromptu reception continued, Melissa approached hesitantly. "Is it true?" she asked quietly. "About Richard being escorted out by security?" "I wasn't present for that conversation," I replied diplomatically. But leadership transitions at executive levels typically involve immediate system access changes and supervised departure, standard protocol. The same protocol, undoubtedly, used during my own dismissal, though without the audience Richard's departure had apparently attracted. The parallelism wasn't lost on either of us. "It feels like..." Melissa hesitated, searching for appropriate words. "Like balance, restoration, of something that was broken." Her sentiment captured the emotional undercurrent flowing through the room, not merely workplace transition, but moral realignment. Richard's approach had violated unspoken cultural contracts about how people deserved to be treated. His removal represented not just organizational change, but ethical correction. As the gathering gradually dispersed, Tyler approached with quiet satisfaction. "That went well," he observed. "Better than projected, actually. We anticipated more resistance, more skepticism." Richard's leadership created fertile ground for change, I explained. When people are sufficiently dissatisfied with current conditions, alternative approaches become more appealing. Tyler nodded thoughtfully. "Still, your presence made a significant difference. You represent the Horizon they remember and want to rebuild." As we prepared to leave, the day's primary objectives accomplished, Mark from accounting appeared at the conference room door. His expression registered complex emotions: discomfort, embarrassment, perhaps regret. Our eyes met briefly before he looked away, mumbling something about coming back later. "Who's that?" Tyler asked, noting the awkward interaction. "Mark Phillips," I replied. He supervised my departure, seemed to enjoy the process more than strictly necessary. Tyler's expression hardened slightly. Should we be concerned about his continued employment? The question presented a pivotal choice, one that would establish precedent for how personal history might influence professional decisions in our new working relationship. I considered carefully before responding. "Mark's technically competent," I said finally. "Not exceptional, but adequate. His interpersonal approach needs improvement, but that reflects leadership example more than inherent character. I'd recommend performance evaluation based on current and future contributions rather than past behavior. Tyler studied me with undisguised admiration. And that's why you belong in leadership. You can separate personal feelings from business decisions when necessary. As we left the building together, employees watched our departure with expressions ranging from curious to hopeful. The symbolism wasn't subtle. The dismissed executive returning alongside new ownership that promised restoration rather than further disruption. It was the kind of narrative that would generate speculation, conversation, perhaps even corporate legend as details evolved through retelling. In the parking garage, Tyler paused before we separated to our respective vehicles. Dinner to celebrate? The team's gathering at Riverside Grill at 7. I considered the invitation, tempted by the camaraderie it offered. I think I need some quiet processing time, I admitted. Rain check for tomorrow? He nodded, understanding. Absolutely. It's been an intense day. He hesitated briefly. Are you okay with everything? Any second thoughts about your involvement? The question invited honest reflection, rather than perfunctory reassurance. I considered my emotional landscape, the satisfaction of Richard's removal, yes, but more prominently the sense of purpose in helping reconstruct what had been carelessly dismantled. The opportunity to build something meaningful from destruction. No second thoughts, I confirmed. Just processing the journey from fired to hired in less than 2 weeks. It's a significant recalibration. Tyler grinned. From discarded to decision maker. Has a nice ring to it. As I drove home through early evening traffic, I reflected on the day's events, not just the business transactions, but the human elements beneath them. The morning light filtered through my kitchen windows as I stood at the counter, coffee in hand, contemplating how dramatically life could change in just 2 weeks. 15 days earlier, I had been marketing director at Horizon Solutions, confident in my position, planning strategic initiatives for the coming quarter. Today, I was client retention strategist for Nexus Ventures, preparing to help rebuild the very company that had discarded me. The irony wasn't lost on me. My phone chimed with a calendar reminder. First day in my new official capacity. Despite having worked closely with Tyler's team during acquisition preparations, today marked formal integration into Nexus's organizational structure. New email account, security clearances, benefits enrollment. The procedural elements of employment that transform theoretical transition into practical reality. I chose my outfit with deliberate intention. The same crimson suit I'd worn yesterday, establishing visual continuity between the woman who had announced new ownership and the woman reporting for duty. In corporate environments, such details matter. They communicate purpose, consistency, control. When I arrived at Horizon's offices, now officially a Nexus Ventures subsidiary, Sam greeted me with a new employee badge already prepared. Welcome back, Ms. Keller. Or should I say, welcome home? His warmth reflected sentiment I'd encountered throughout yesterday's announcement. For employees who had weathered Richard's disruptive leadership, my return represented connection to more stable times. I embodied institutional memory that Richard had attempted to erase, living proof that experience held value despite his emphasis on youth and theoretical innovation over practical expertise. The 14th floor hummed with unusual energy for early morning. Employees gathered in small clusters, conversation animated as they processed yesterday's dramatic ownership change. As I passed, discussions paused briefly, acknowledgement and curiosity mingling in their expressions. I smiled in greeting, but maintained purposeful movement toward the executive wing where temporary offices had been established for Nexus's transition team. Tyler had already arrived, dressed impeccably in charcoal suit and blue tie that conveyed authority without ostentation. He looked up from conversation with Raphael as I entered the conference room they'd commandeered as operational headquarters. "Morning," he greeted with professional neutrality. Our agreed approach to managing the potentially complicated dynamics of mother-son relationship in business context. Ready for departmental meetings? I nodded, accepting the tablet Raphael offered. Schedules loaded with current department configurations and key personnel notes, he explained. We're starting with marketing at 9, then customer support, development, and finance. Each scheduled for 90 minutes with 30-minute breaks between. I scrolled through the meeting agenda, noting thorough preparation. Tyler's team had compiled organizational charts, performance metrics, and preliminary assessment of each department's current status. The level of detail reflected weeks of research beyond what I had contributed during acquisition planning. 1. Update, Tyler added. Mark Phillips requested an early meeting. He's waiting in the small conference room. The information registered with mild surprise. Mark, who had supervised my exit with poorly concealed satisfaction, now sought direct communication. Interesting development. Want company for that conversation? Raphael offered, his tone conveying awareness of potential awkwardness. I shook my head. I'll handle it. Professional redemption required direct engagement rather than protective buffers. Mark stood as I entered the small conference room, his typical confidence notably diminished. He fidgeted with his collar, adjusted his tie, shifted weight between feet, physical manifestations of discomfort that suggested this meeting held personal significance beyond ordinary business discussion. Jennifer, he began, then corrected himself. Ms. Keller, thank you for seeing me. I gestured toward the chairs. Please sit. What can I help with this morning? We settled across the table from each other, roles reversed from our last interaction, when he had supervised my departure. The symmetry wasn't subtle, though I made no comment on it. Mark cleared his throat. I wanted to speak with you directly, given our history. He paused, searching for appropriate words. My behavior during your departure was unprofessional. I allowed personal ambition to override proper respect for your contributions to Horizon. That was wrong. I apologize. The directness surprised me. I had anticipated defensiveness, perhaps attempts to reframe past interactions in more flattering light. Instead, Mark offered unambiguous acknowledgement of inappropriate conduct. I appreciate that recognition, I replied carefully. Transitions are challenging for everyone involved. Some handle them better than others. He nodded, releasing a tense breath. There's more, actually. Richard had promised me your position, or a version of it, after restructuring was complete. That influenced my behavior during your departure. I was already mentally moving into leadership role. The admission explained much about his demeanor that day, the poorly concealed satisfaction, the cataloging of my office belongings, the performative sympathy that rang hollow. He had been measuring the office for his occupancy even as I packed my personal items. I assume those plans have changed given recent developments, I observed. Mark's expression confirmed the obvious. Completely. I'm actually expecting termination, given my alignment with Richard's approach. He paused. That's partially why I wanted to speak with you directly. I understand you'll have influence in determining which personnel remain during Nexus's reorganization. And there it was, the practical motivation beneath moral recognition. Mark feared for his position given his association with ousted leadership. His apology, while perhaps genuine, also served strategic purpose. I studied him thoughtfully, considering how to navigate this intersection of personal history and professional evaluation. Vindictiveness would be emotionally satisfying, but potentially counterproductive for company stabilization. Yet overlooking his behavior would establish problematic precedent. Your technical competence isn't in question, I said finally. Your financial analyses have generally been accurate and thorough. The concern would be your judgment regarding personnel matters and professional relationships. Those elements require careful consideration when evaluating leadership potential. Mark nodded rapidly. Completely understood. I'm not expecting advancement consideration, just opportunity to demonstrate value under new management. His voice held genuine anxiety, the same fear I had experienced during my own unexpected departure. I won't make unilateral decisions. About any department staffing, I clarified. Those evaluations will involve relevant leadership and objective performance assessment. Your historical work will be considered alongside recent conduct and potential future contribution. Relief visibly softened his features. That's fair. More than fair, actually. Thank you. As he stood to leave, I added one final point. Professional? Environments reflect leadership values, Mark. Richard created culture that rewarded certain behaviors, prioritizing cost-cutting over relationships, youth over experience, theoretical innovation over practical expertise. You adapted to those values, as many did. Now, leadership values have changed again. Adaptation remains possible if genuinely embraced. He paused at the door, considering this perspective. I understand. And for what it's worth, I think Horizon will be better under new ownership. Things were deteriorating under Richard's approach. After he departed, I remained seated, briefly, processing the interaction. Mark's apology represented first tangible evidence of power shift beyond yesterday's formal announcement. The same individual who had supervised my humiliation now sought my forbearance, dramatic role reversal that concretized abstract concept of corporate karma. My contemplation ended as Tyler appeared in the doorway. Everything all right with Phillips? I nodded. He's recalibrating to new reality. Apologized for his behavior during my departure. Tyler's expression registered skepticism. Convenient timing for sudden moral clarity. Self-interest and genuine recognition aren't mutually exclusive, I observed. People can simultaneously protect their positions and recognize past mistakes. So you're recommending retention? I'm recommending objective evaluation based on complete performance record. His financial analysis skills remain valuable despite interpersonal shortcomings. Tyler studied me with approval. That measured approach is exactly why you belong in leadership. The exchange established important precedent for our working relationship. I would make recommendations based on business considerations rather than personal history, and Tyler would respect my professional judgment despite our personal connection. Both elements were essential for successful navigation of our unusual situation. Departmental meetings occupied the remainder of the day, each following similar pattern. Tyler introduced Nexus's leadership philosophy and preliminary restructuring plans. I provided stability through institutional knowledge, addressing specific questions that required historical context. Raphael outlined immediate priorities for operational continuity during transition. Employee responses varied across departments. Marketing staff, many of whom I had personally hired and mentored, expressed immediate enthusiasm for new direction, particularly promises to restore relationship-focused approach that had been diminished under Richard's leadership. Customer support representatives voiced cautious optimism, their perspectives shaped by direct exposure to client dissatisfaction during recent months. Development engineers asked practical questions about project continuity and technological direction, rather than management philosophy. Finance personnel demonstrated greatest reservation, having aligned most closely with Richard's cost-focused approach. Throughout these interactions, I maintained careful balance between former colleague and new leadership representative. I acknowledged shared history while establishing appropriate professional distance. This wasn't simple return to previous position, but evolution into new role with different responsibilities and relationships. By late afternoon, Tyler's transition team gathered to assess initial progress. Raphael reported encouraging client responses to ownership change announcements, particularly from major accounts like Anderson and Westfield. Keisha provided updates on contractual transitions and regulatory filings. Emma outlined personnel retention strategies focused on key employees Richard had marginalized, but who hadn't yet departed. Overall assessment? Tyler prompted after. Individual reports concluded. More positive than projected, Raphael replied. Staff resistance is minimal compared to typical acquisition scenarios. Client reaction ranges from neutral to enthusiastic, with no immediate account losses identified. The Jennifer effect, Emma suggested. Her return signals continuity with Horizon's more successful period. She bridges institutional history with new direction. Their analysis confirmed what I had sensed throughout the day. My presence provided transition advantage beyond specific professional expertise. I represented connection between past achievements and future potential, embodying both stability and change simultaneously. As the meeting concluded, Tyler addressed me directly. You've been relatively quiet. Thoughts after first official day? I considered the question carefully, aware that my response would establish tone for ongoing professional relationship. The foundation remains stronger than anticipated, despite Richard's attempts at dismantling. Corporate culture persists through individuals rather than formal structures. Many employees maintained Horizon's original values despite leadership pressure to abandon them. Tyler nodded. That persistence creates advantage for recovery efforts. People remember what worked before Richard's arrival. There's another factor worth noting, I added. Richard's approach created inadvertent vaccine effect. By implementing demonstrably unsuccessful strategies, he strengthened organizational antibodies against similar future attempts. Staff experienced firsthand why prioritizing short-term metrics over client relationships ultimately fails. Immunization through negative example, Tyler observed thoughtfully. Interesting perspective. As transition team dispersed for the evening, Raphael paused beside me. Several of us are gathering for dinner if you'd like to join. Informal. Opportunity to process the day. The invitation represented implicit acceptance into Nexus's organizational culture, professional camaraderie extending beyond formal working relationships. Under normal circumstances, I would have accepted immediately, recognizing importance of such connections for integration into new environment. Rain check? I responded instead. Processing time still necessary after these transitions. Raphael nodded understanding. Standing invitation whenever you're ready. As I prepared to leave, Tyler appeared at my temporary office door. Dinner? He asked simply. Unlike Raphael's group invitation, Tyler's suggested mother-son connection, rather than professional relationship. The distinction mattered on multiple levels, establishing appropriate boundaries between personal and professional interactions, determining how our unusual situation would be navigated moving forward. Let's discuss privately, I suggested, gathering my belongings. We walked silently to the parking garage, maintaining professional composure until reaching relative privacy beside our vehicles. You're managing this transition impressively, Tyler observed. I've seen experienced executives struggle more with less complicated situations. I've had excellent motivation, I replied with slight smile. Vindication provides powerful incentive for composed performance. Tyler laughed, genuine reaction that temporarily dissolved professional veneer. Fair point. So, about dinner. We should probably establish guidelines for balancing personal and professional relationships. When are we mother-son versus colleagues? The question captured central complexity of our situation. While working together offered meaningful opportunity, it also created potential complications requiring deliberate navigation. Office interactions should maintain professional parameters, I suggested. First names, appropriate formality, decisions based on business considerations rather than personal connection. Tyler nodded agreement. And outside office hours? That distinction depends on context. Professional events with colleagues present require continued appropriate boundaries. Truly private settings allow normal family relationship. And And tonight? I considered the question thoughtfully. Tonight feels like appropriate transition between these worlds. Celebratory acknowledgement of unusual situation without colleagues present to navigate potential complications. Tyler grinned. Italian or Thai? We settled on Thai, familiar comfort food that carried personal associations rather than corporate dining connotations. The restaurant offered cozy atmosphere conducive to conversation outside office parameters. As we settled into booth in quiet corner, Tyler visibly relaxed, professional demeanor softening into more familiar son rather than CEO. "This is surreal," he admitted after ordering. "2 weeks ago, you were calling me about Horizon's apparent disinterest in your marketing strategy. Now, we own the company." The observation highlighted extraordinary trajectory of recent events. My response acknowledged both professional and personal dimensions of our shared experience. Life rarely follows anticipated paths, I noted. That applies to both career trajectories and parent-child relationships. "Speaking of which," Tyler replied, expression turning reflective, "there's something I've wanted to ask since acquisition process began. Are you uncomfortable with our reversed positions? With me technically being your boss in organizational structure?" The question addressed potential tension I had considered extensively during past days. Traditional parent-child dynamics presume parental authority gradual transferring to adult-child independence, not professional authority of child over parent. Such reversal could create psychological difficulty if not properly managed. Honestly, it's adjustment, I acknowledged. But healthy one. Parents should want their children to succeed beyond their own achievements. Your success doesn't diminish. Mine, it validates parenting choices and personal sacrifices made during your upbringing. Tyler's expression softened with emotion rarely displayed in professional settings. "Those sacrifices weren't unnoticed," he said quietly. "Even when I was too young to fully understand, I recognized efforts you made, working late after putting me to bed, rescheduling your commitments around my activities, stretching limited resources to provide opportunities." The conversation had shifted from professional assessment to deeply personal territory. Acknowledgement of shared history that shaped our current unusual situation. Such openness would be inappropriate in office setting, but represented important foundation for navigating our dual relationships moving forward. "Those weren't sacrifices," I clarified. "They were investments in person you could become. Returns have exceeded expectations." Our food arrived, providing natural transition to lighter conversation topics. We discussed practical aspects of maintaining appropriate boundaries during office hours, strategies for addressing inevitable speculation about our relationship, and approaches for navigating potential disagreements when they arose. These considerations established framework for professional interaction while honoring personal connection beneath formal roles. As dinner concluded, Tyler raised final significant question. "Have you thought about Richard? Whether he deserves direct acknowledgement of situational irony?" The inquiry addressed unspoken element of recent events, potential satisfaction, in ensuring Richard recognized connection between his decision to terminate my employment and subsequent loss of his own position. Such recognition would provide vindication beyond mere professional recovery. I considered the question thoughtfully. What would such acknowledgement accomplish beyond momentary satisfaction? Richard likely already recognizes connection. It's hardly subtle. Direct confrontation would reflect poorly on me professionally and potentially create unnecessary complications for transition process. Tyler nodded, appearing simultaneously impressed and amused. That's remarkably mature perspective. I might have been tempted to ensure he fully appreciated cosmic justice involved. Age occasionally provides advantages beyond technical skills, I observed with smile. Perspective on what ultimately matters represents one such benefit. As we prepared to leave, Tyler added casually, "By the way, the board's requested meeting tomorrow afternoon. They'd like direct update on transition progress from leadership team, including you specifically. The information registered with mild surprise. Me? I've only officially started today. Your unique asset in this transition, bridge between horizons past and future. The board recognizes your value beyond specific operational role. They want your assessment of cultural integration challenges and client relationship recovery prospects. The request reflected institutional acknowledgement of my contributions, validation extending beyond Tyler's personal appreciation into formal corporate recognition. After Richard's dismissal of my experience as outdated and dispensable, such recognition carried significant emotional weight. "I'll prepare appropriate presentation," I replied, professional tone masking deeper satisfaction. The following morning introduced new rhythm to long familiar environment. I arrived early, using quiet hours to prepare board presentation and review. Client contact priorities for coming days. The office gradually filled with employees who greeted me with increasing comfort. Initial shock of my return evolving into acceptance of new organizational reality. Department heads stopped by throughout morning, ostensibly seeking guidance on transition questions, but actually establishing relationship parameters under restructured leadership. These interactions required careful navigation, maintaining appropriate authority, while encouraging collaborative approach rather than hierarchical deference. By afternoon, transition activities had settled into productive patterns across departments. Marketing team developed client communication strategy, emphasizing stability and renewed commitment to relationship-focused approach. Customer support implemented documentation protocols for tracking recent service complaints requiring immediate attention. Development prioritized projects delayed during Richard's cost-cutting measures, but essential for competitive positioning. Board meeting preparation occupied final hours before presentation, with Tyler's leadership team gathering to coordinate messaging and address potential concerns. Raphael provided updated client retention projections showing improvement following ownership announcement. Emma reported successful re-engagement with 3 key employees who had departed during Richard's tenure, but expressed interest in returning under new management. Keisha outlined regulatory compliance aspects of transition that required board awareness. As we prepared to leave for board offices downtown, Tyler pulled me aside briefly. "Remember," he advised quietly, "these are same board members who approved Richard's leadership approach and allowed your termination without intervention. They're not adversaries currently, but neither are they demonstrated allies." The reminder established important context for upcoming presentation. While board had unanimously approved Nexus's acquisition offer, their previous decisions had enabled organizational deterioration that necessitated ownership change. Their responsibility for Horizon's recent challenges remained relevant consideration when addressing future direction. Board chambers occupied top floor of downtown office building, deliberately imposing space designed to reinforce authority through environmental cues. Mahogany table dominated center of room, surrounded by high-backed leather chairs positioned slightly higher than visitor seating. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided dramatic cityscape background that emphasized power dynamics through elevated perspective. 9 board members awaited our arrival, expressions revealing various reactions to recent ownership transition. Charles Whitman, board chairman, displayed practiced neutrality masking likely embarrassment over failed leadership selection. Victoria Chen, longest-serving member, appeared cautiously optimistic given her known reservations about Richard's approach. James Harrison, newest appointee and Richard's strongest advocate, maintained barely concealed hostility toward changes his preferred leadership approach had necessitated. Tyler led introductions with practiced confidence that established immediate authority despite relative youth compared to board membership. He presented transition team members with emphasis on complementary expertise areas rather than hierarchical structure, positioning Nexus's approach as collaborative rather than command-oriented. When introducing me, Tyler maintained careful balance between acknowledging our unusual situation and establishing my independent professional credibility. Jennifer Keller returns to Horizon as client retention strategist after 15 years building the company's market position and client relationships. Her institutional knowledge provides invaluable perspective during this transition period. My position at table, directly across from Victoria Chen rather than adjacent to Tyler, reinforced message of professional independence despite personal connection. This seating arrangement had been deliberately planned to address potential concerns about nepotism or undue influence in decision-making processes. Formal presentations proceeded with methodical precision over subsequent hour. Raphael outlined financial stabilization strategies emphasizing renewed focus on client relationship, quality over short-term cost reduction. Emma presented organizational recovery plan, targeting cultural restoration and retention of institutional knowledge through strategic personnel decisions. Keisha addressed regulatory aspects of ownership transition and contractual obligations, requiring board awareness. Throughout these presentations, I observed board members closely, noting individual reactions to specific elements of recovery strategy. Victoria Chen displayed particular interest in client retention projections, suggesting genuine concern for relationship aspects of business beyond purely financial metrics. James Harrison focused exclusively on cost implications of proposed changes, his expression registering skepticism regarding value of investments in personnel and service quality improvements. When my presentation turn arrived, I focused on client relationship recovery with emphasis on concrete examples rather than abstract principles. The Anderson account, I began, represents instructive case study in relationship deterioration under previous leadership. Their 15-year partnership with Horizon included successful navigation of multiple market challenges and technological transitions. That relationship has been reduced to transactional engagement over past 6 months through service reductions, staff reassignments, and diminished communication. Board members leaned forward attentively as I continued without referencing presentation, slides, or prepared notes. I spoke with Thomas Anderson personally yesterday. His response to ownership transition included cautious optimism. The boardroom fell silent as I finished detailing the Anderson account situation. I looked directly at each board member, letting the implications sink in before continuing. "This isn't an isolated case," I said, my voice steady and authoritative. "The Westfield opportunity, potentially our largest account, nearly evaporated when I was removed from client contact. Eleanor Winters contacted me personally the day after my termination to express concerns about proceeding without the relationship we'd built over months of conversation. Only our ownership transition has renewed their interest in partnership." Victoria Chen nodded slightly, her expression confirming this aligned with concerns she'd previously raised. James Harrison shifted uncomfortably, his earlier dismissiveness now tempered by concrete examples of relationship deterioration. "The pattern repeats across our client portfolio," I continued. "Relationships built over years were treated as transferable commodities rather than delicate trust structures requiring consistent nurturing. Our recovery strategy prioritizes immediate personal outreach to every major account, conducted by individuals who understand their specific needs and history with Horizon." I paused, allowing space for questions before addressing the most sensitive aspect of my presentation. When none came immediately, I moved forward with deliberate calm. "I'd like to address the elephant in the room," I said, making brief eye contact with Charles Whitman, the board chairman. My return to Horizon following dismissal creates natural questions about personal motivation versus professional judgment. It's fair to consider whether my assessment reflects objective analysis or emotional response to recent experiences. Several board members straightened in their chairs, clearly uncomfortable with direct acknowledgement of the awkward situation. I pressed forward without allowing the discomfort to derail my message. "I can only offer this perspective. Effective. Leaders separate personal feelings from professional assessments when necessary. The observations I've shared today are supported by quantifiable metrics: client retention decline, service quality deterioration, staff turnover increases. These aren't subjective impressions, but documented patterns that accelerated under previous leadership. Victoria Chen leaned forward. Ms. Keller, your candor is appreciated. May I ask directly, given your unique position straddling both previous and current ownership, what you believe was the fundamental misstep in our recent direction? The question invited potentially contentious assessment of board decisions that had enabled Richard's approach. I considered carefully before responding, aware that my answer would establish important precedent for relationship with governance body. The fundamental misstep wasn't selecting new leadership, I replied thoughtfully. Organizations require periodic renewal and fresh perspectives. The misstep was embracing philosophical approach that dismissed relationship value in favor of pure efficiency metrics without recognizing how those relationships generated the very profits being measured. Charles Whitman nodded slowly, his expression suggesting reluctant recognition of accurate assessment. And your recommendation for avoiding similar mistakes moving forward? Balance between innovation and institutional knowledge, I suggested. New approaches tempered by understanding of what already works well. Cost management informed by recognition of relationship investments that generate long-term returns. Efficiency measured by client outcomes rather than purely internal metrics. As my presentation concluded, Tyler smoothly transitioned to integrated recovery timeline, emphasizing immediate stabilization priorities followed by growth initiatives, once core client relationships had been secured. Throughout his overview, board members directed clarifying questions to appropriate team members, creating collaborative dialogue rather than interrogative challenge. The meeting concluded with Charles Whitman expressing formal board support for transition strategy while requesting bi-weekly updates during initial stabilization period. As we gathered materials following adjournment, Victoria Chen approached me directly. "Jennifer," she began with uncharacteristic informality, "I want you to know that several board members expressed concerns when Richard recommended your termination. We were assured it was part of necessary modernization strategy rather than personal decision." The statement represented closest approximation to apology institutional constraints would likely permit. While not acknowledging direct responsibility for approving my dismissal, it conveyed recognition that decision had been problematic. Organizational progress requires both innovation and continuity, I replied diplomatically. Finding appropriate balance benefits everyone involved. Victoria nodded appreciatively at response that provided graceful resolution without conceding professional ground. "I'm pleased you've returned in new capacity. Your understanding of Horizon's foundations provides valuable perspective during this transition." As we departed board offices, Tyler maintained professional demeanor until reaching street level, where satisfaction visibly broke through composed expression. "That," he observed quietly, "went substantially better than projected. Your handling of potential conflict regarding your return was particularly effective. Direct acknowledgement prevents others from controlling narrative," I explained. "By addressing obvious questions openly, we demonstrate confidence in our positions while removing potential wedge issues." The remainder of week passed in blur. Of activity, department reorganizations, client outreach initiatives, personnel discussions regarding employees displaced during Richard's tenure. Each day brought new challenges requiring navigation of complex interpersonal dynamics alongside practical business considerations. By Friday afternoon, initial stabilization metrics showed promising trends. Raphael's client retention report indicated positive responses from 83% of major accounts following ownership transition communications. Emma's personnel assessment documented successful re-engagement with 5 key employees who had departed during Richard's leadership, but expressed interest in returning under new management. Most significant development emerged unexpectedly through industry channels. Richard had accepted position with regional competitors significantly smaller than Horizon, apparently unable to secure a role comparable to his previous leadership position. The news circulated rapidly through office grapevine, generating poorly concealed satisfaction among employees who had suffered under his management approach. Tyler addressed the information directly during afternoon leadership meeting. Richard's new position should be noted but not emphasized in our communications, he advised. We acknowledge awareness without creating impression of continued focus on previous leadership. Our attention remains on Horizon's future rather than past challenges. His guidance demonstrated mature leadership perspective, recognizing emotional satisfaction in competitors' apparent downgrading of Richard's market value, while prioritizing professional focus on organizational recovery rather than personal vindication. Weekend provided welcome respite from intensity of transition activities. Saturday morning found me lingering over coffee on back deck, contemplating extraordinary changes recent weeks had delivered. From marketing director to unemployed professional to client retention strategist, trajectory no career planning could have anticipated. My contemplation was interrupted by text message from Tyler. Brunch? New place downtown getting excellent reviews. The invitation straddled personal and professional boundaries. Social interaction recognizing familial relationship while occurring in public setting, where professional colleagues might observe our interaction. Such complexity characterized our unusual situation, requiring continuous navigation of appropriate boundaries between different relationship aspects. See you at 11, I replied, appreciating opportunity for reflection on week's developments outside office environment. The restaurant occupied converted warehouse space in trendy district, exposed brick walls complemented by industrial lighting, fixtures and minimalist furniture. Tyler waited at corner table, offering privacy without conspicuous separation from other diners. Thoughtful selection reflecting awareness of our unique circumstances. After ordering, conversation initially focused on transition progress, client responses to ownership change, employee adaptation to new leadership approach, board reaction to recovery strategy. These topics maintained comfortable professional distance while acknowledging shared interest in organizational outcomes. As meal progressed, discussion gradually shifted toward personal dimensions of recent experiences. How are you processing everything? Tyler asked during momentary lull. Beyond professional considerations? The question invited reflection on emotional aspects of extraordinary situation, from humiliation of dismissal to satisfaction of unexpected redemption. Such personal territory would be inappropriate in office setting, but represented important conversation between mother and son rather than colleagues. It's complex, I acknowledged after thoughtful pause. Professional vindication provides undeniable satisfaction. Seeing Richard's approach discredited validates my consistent advocacy for relationship-focused strategy. But more meaningful aspect has been witnessing your leadership capabilities, your strategic vision, your team-building skills, your ethical approach to business challenges. Tyler appeared momentarily surprised by direction of response, expecting focus on Richard's downfall rather than pride in his own achievements. His expression reflected genuine emotion rarely displayed in professional settings. I learned those approaches from watching you, he said quietly. Your handling of difficult clients with respect rather than frustration. Your mentoring of junior staff who needed development rather than criticism. Your consistent emphasis on building something worthwhile rather than simply profitable. The exchange acknowledged deeper connection underlying our professional collaboration. Shared values transmitted through years of observed behavior rather than explicit instruction. Such foundation provided essential trust, enabling unusual working relationship to function effectively despite potential complications. There's something I haven't told you, Tyler added after brief silence, about Horizon's acquisition. I raised questioning eyebrow, curious about previously undisclosed aspect of recent events. Richard approached Nexus 3 months ago, he explained. Before your termination, he suggested partnership opportunity, his operational approach combined with our technical capabilities. During preliminary discussions, he specifically identified you as impediment to modernization he considered necessary, described you as resistant to essential changes, and overly focused on outdated relationship models. The revelation landed with surprising impact, despite already knowing Richard's negative assessment of my contributions. Direct confirmation of deliberate targeting rather than incidental outcome of broader reorganization provided different perspective on recent events. Those conversations actually accelerated our interest in Horizon, Tyler continued. His dismissal of relationship value demonstrated fundamental misunderstanding of what made the company successful. When he specifically identified you as obstacle to his approach, it confirmed our assessment that his strategy was fundamentally flawed. I processed this information thoughtfully, recognizing multiple dimensions beyond simple vindication narrative. So my termination actually contributed to your acquisition decision? Tyler nodded. It demonstrated Richard didn't understand what he was dismantling, that he viewed experienced personnel as obstacles rather than assets. When opportunity to acquire Horizon emerged, your potential return represented significant advantage rather than complication. This perspective transformed narrative completely, from simple revenge story to recognition that Richard's failure to value experience had directly enabled transition, returning control to leadership, valuing precisely those qualities he had dismissed. The irony contained perfect symmetry rarely found outside literary construction. Does Richard know? I asked, curious whether he recognized direct connection between his decision to terminate my employment and subsequent loss of his position. He knows Nexus acquired Horizon and you've returned in leadership capacity, Tyler replied. Whether he's connected those dots directly remains uncertain. Some people struggle to recognize patterns contradicting their established worldview. As brunch concluded, our conversation returned to pragmatic considerations for coming week. Mondays, department reorganization announcements. Tuesday's client appreciation event. Wednesday's staff town hall addressing transition questions. The seamless movement between personal and professional topics demonstrated evolving comfort with our unusual dual relationship. Monday morning arrived with renewed energy throughout Horizon offices. Weekend distance had provided employees opportunity to process ownership transition. Returning with questions evolved from initial shock to practical concerns about organizational direction. This shift represented healthy progression from emotional reaction toward productive engagement with new reality. Department reorganization announcements occupied morning meetings, with each presentation emphasizing thoughtful integration of previous structure with necessary improvements rather than wholesale rejection of existing approaches. This messaging reinforced core philosophy of balanced change, respecting institutional knowledge while implementing targeted enhancements, addressing identified weaknesses. As meetings concluded, Melissa appeared at my office door with expressions suggesting significant development requiring immediate attention. Jennifer, Eleanor Winters is here, unscheduled. She's asking to speak with you directly. The information registered with appropriate concern. Westfield represented potentially largest account in Horizon's portfolio, relationship cultivated over months of careful conversation, but not yet secured through formal agreement. Eleanor's unannounced arrival suggested urgent matter requiring personal attention rather than scheduled business discussion. Where is she now? I asked, already gathering materials potentially relevant to Westfield's implementation concerns. Main conference room, Melissa replied. Tyler's with her temporarily, but she specifically requested your participation. I nodded acknowledgement, moving with purposeful stride toward unexpected meeting. Eleanor's presence represented both opportunity and challenge. Potential acceleration of important client relationship, but also indication of possible concerns requiring immediate address. Tyler stood as I entered conference room, professional demeanor masking apparent relief at my arrival. Jennifer, excellent timing. Eleanor was just sharing some interesting developments regarding Westfield's technology integration plans. Eleanor. Winters, formidable executive with reputation for direct communication and unwavering focus on business objectives, extended hand in greeting that conveyed professional respect rather than social pleasantry. Jennifer, good to see you in appropriate setting rather than explaining your abrupt departure. Her reference to post-termination conversation established immediate context for unscheduled visit, connecting current discussion to previous interaction following my dismissal from Horizon. The implication suggested her presence related directly to ownership transition rather than specific implementation questions. Westfield's technology requirements remain my priority regardless of organizational changes, I replied, establishing continuity between past conversations and current position. How can we assist with integration planning? Eleanor's expression conveyed approval at business-focused response rather than emphasis on personal circumstances. Directly then, Westfield's executive committee reviewed vendor options yesterday. Given Horizon's ownership transition and your return to leadership involvement, we've decided to proceed with full implementation partnership effective immediately. The announcement represented significant business development, major account, commitment accelerated beyond projected timeline based specifically on ownership change and leadership restoration. Such immediate positive outcome validated transition strategy, while providing tangible evidence of relationship value Richard had systematically dismissed. That's excellent news, Tyler responded, maintaining appropriate professional enthusiasm, despite obvious satisfaction at confirmation of acquisition benefits. We're prepared to begin implementation planning immediately if that timeline aligns with your requirements. Eleanor nodded briskly. My technical team is available this afternoon to review integration specifications. I've already instructed procurement to process initial payment for Phase 1 development. As meeting transitioned to implementation logistics, Eleanor addressed me directly during momentary pause. Your termination nearly cost Horizon this account, she stated matter-of-factly. Our committee had significant concerns about proceeding without your direct involvement. Current ownership's recognition of that value factored considerably in our decision. The comment, delivered without emotional emphasis but with characteristic directness, provided unambiguous professional validation from respected industry executive. Such explicit acknowledgement carried substantially greater impact than general expressions of support from colleagues or friends. After Eleanor departed with implementation meetings scheduled for afternoon, Tyler allowed professional demeanor to relax slightly. That, he observed with understated satisfaction, represents immediate tangible validation of our acquisition approach. Securing Westfield accelerates projected recovery timeline substantially. Eleanor's directness provides valuable external perspective, I agreed. Her explicit connection between relationship continuity and account commitment documents what Richard consistently failed to recognize, that institutional knowledge directly impacts financial outcomes. The quarterly meeting arrived faster than anyone expected. I sat in the back of the conference room, watching as Richard presented the dismal numbers to the board members. His voice grew increasingly strained as he tried to explain away the client, losses and failed initiatives. I could almost feel sorry for him. Almost. Then Tyler stood up. My son, dressed impeccably in a suit that probably cost more than Richard's car payment, walked confidently to the front of the room. Thank you for that illuminating presentation, Richard, he said, his voice calm and measured. Now, I'd like to introduce myself properly. I'm Tyler Williams, CEO of Nexus Ventures, and as of this morning, the new owner of Horizon Solutions. The room fell silent. Richard's face drained of color as he finally connected the dots. the son of the woman he had so callously discarded had become his boss. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I couldn't hide my smile as I walked to the front to join Tyler. As the new client relations director, I said, looking directly at Richard, I'd like to thank you for clearing my schedule. 3 weeks ago, it gave me plenty of time to help my son finalize this acquisition. Sarah from HR, who had handed me my severance papers with such professional detachment, suddenly found her coffee cup fascinating. Mark from accounting, who had smirked while escorting me from the building, was now studying the ceiling tiles with great interest. Sometimes life delivers justice in the most unexpected packages. As Richard was escorted from the building that afternoon, carrying his belongings in the same type of cardboard box I had used, I didn't feel the vindication I had expected. Instead, I felt something much more valuable: peace. And the knowledge that sometimes, when one door closes, your son buys the whole building. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.